Following clips used in this video are owned by Hasbro. Please support the official release by buying the DVDs or watching on streaming services. Thank you. Hi, welcome back to my video series on Beast Wars, where we now look at the show's final season, Season 3. Now, if you saw my last video, or just remember the show, you'll know that Season 2 ended on a pretty big cliffhanger with Megatron killing Optimus Prime and practically warping the fabric of time and space. Which, now that I think about it, doesn't that kind of remind you of the ending of the show Reboot, where the final villain, or bleh. Which, now that I think about it, doesn't it remind you of the ending of Reboot, where Megabyte won and it got you excited to see what happened next? But unlike Reboot, which got cancelled after that big cliffhanger, Beast Wars did get to have another season which continued the story. So with that, let's start up Season 3 and see how it goes. The first episode, titled Optimal Situation, picks up right where we last left off, with the fabric of space and time being destroyed. Where we see Megatron celebrating his victory, with Black Arachnia bringing up how she was a maximal protoform, meaning that if the Decepticons win, then she will cease to exist. So she turns on the ship's defenses to get rid of Megatron, and asks Silverbolt for help to get the life support system on Optimus Prime, mostly to help keep him alive long enough so they can hopefully save the space-time continuum, where the rest of the Maximals come to help and see that his spark is fading fast. So our Optimus Primal, decides to hold his spark in his own body to hopefully keep him alive long enough so they can repair his body and save the future. With everyone saying that's a bad idea, but with everything going on right now, they don't have much choice in the matter. And when he goes to do it, it does work, however, the matrix inside of him breaks. But now that they have a place for a spark, they get to work on repairing him. Okay, so, fun fact, if you were paying attention to what's going on in the arc, then you would notice that all the Maximals and Predacons are actually a lot smaller than everything on board. And the lore reason for that is because over time, they started to consume too much energon, so they gave themselves smaller bodies to consume less. Which is why in this show, the Transformers are more like the size of humans than giant robots like we're used to. Then we see Megatron outside, calling in some of his subordinates to come help take the Ark back. Back inside the Ark, we see them scrambling to save Optimus Prime, while Optimus Primal is not feeling well having two sparks in his body. After another montage of the Predacons putting themselves back together, we see what having two sparks does to Optimus Primal.
Big butt? How do you feel?
In a word, cry.
With Megatron coming in to take the Ark back, but is stopped by Optimus, who desperately wants to deal with this without causing a firefight, which could cause more damage to the Ark than it already has been. But after a distraction, the Predacons leave and the Maximals realize that their base is currently unguarded. So they leave Rhinox behind to repair Optimus Prime, while the rest of them hightail it back to base. And while getting out of the cavern, we see that Optimus Primal is now starting to sound like Optimus Prime.
Stay close, Maximum. It's time to transform and roll out.
Outside, we see Black Arachnia getting caught by Megatron while trying to escape, leading to her getting shot and left for dead, while half the Maximals keep trying to get back to their base before the Predacons could do more damage to it than they already have, with the other half tending to Black Arachnia, who, after a lame love speech from Silverbolt, actually agrees to join the Maximals, but still chooses to stay as a Predacon. Then after a brief but fun aerial battle, we see Rampage trying to pull the Maximal ship off the cliff it's just barely hanging on from. And despite Optimus' best efforts, he accidentally ricochets a missile trying to save Optimus Prime's spark, which leads to their base/home getting destroyed. But thankfully around this time, they did finish the repairs on Optimus Prime, leading to his spark being put back in, which restores the fabric of space and time. With Rat Trap sarcastically saying that they now have to keep it this way for the next few million years, with Optimus actually agreeing with him, where he then tells the rest of them to salvage what's left of their ship, leading to a really cool long shot showing them setting up shop in the cavern, ending the episode. Hey, did anyone else find it funny how Optimus is now too big for the old ship, so they have to make a special terminal just so he can operate the computer? I don't know, I just thought that was a little funny. As well, that was the beginning of Season 3 of Beast Wars, and I gotta say, it was really good. Granted, I was expecting it to be a multi-parter, given how big the stakes were set up in the last season, but aside from that, this was good. And I also love how they set up the new status quo for the season. Yeah, when you really think about it, each of the seasons had a status quo. Like, Season 1 was about the Maximals and Predacons fighting over Energon, which eventually spiraled into them discovering aliens, which wanted them dead. Season 2 was about Megatron putting his master plan together while we learned more about what was on the Golden Disc. Now this season is about the Maximals trying to defend the Ark from Megatron while hopefully trying to keep the fabric of time in check. So, yeah, the stakes definitely have gone up. And with that, I'm excited to see more, so let's keep going. Deep Metal starts off by showing the Maximals are not having the best time trying to set up their new base after bringing back what's left of their old one. Where we then cut to space, where we see a Maximal ship with whoever's inside looking for Protoform X, which we know as Rampage. But then he runs into an anomaly which starts to change his body and send him back to prehistoric Earth, with even Rampage noticing his arrival. Then we see Cheetor reporting this to Optimus, who thinks that it might be a rescue ship to come get them. But then Cheetor gets shot down by Rampage, who wants to fight whoever's in that ship one-on-one. Where, once it crashed underwater, it starts to scan a beast mode for the one who's inside of it.
Depth charge. Maximize!
Where he then helps Cheetor onto dry land before going back to look for Rampage. Then for the next chunk of the episode, it's mostly just Depth Charge and Rampage fighting until they can barely move. And when he's brought back to the Maximal base, Optimus fills in the others on why he's after Rampage. And apparently it was because he was in charge of guarding a colony, which was unfortunately slaughtered by Rampage, and he's wanted revenge ever since. And after Depth Charge learns what the Maximals are fighting for at the moment, he decides not to join them and continue to fight Rampage on his own. With the episode ending with Rampage destroying his ship to remove any chance he had at leaving. Which I doubt he had any plans to do so in the first place. Okay, that was an interesting episode. Mostly because we got to learn more about Rampage, who is a character we never got to know much about in the last season, because back then all we knew was that he was a failed experiment that Megatron got his hands on, and he's now just a grunt for the Predacons. And here we do learn more about what he did and what got him thrown onto the ship in the first place. And it makes sense that he would have enemies, which leads to the next thing about this episode. Depth Charge. I think he was an interesting addition to the cast because, unlike all the other Maximals who want to help keep everything in check so they don't stop existing, Depth Charge just wants revenge, which, I'll admit, is an interesting motive given how revenge wasn't really something anyone did in this show up to this point. So, yeah, I highly recommend this episode. Changing of the Guard is both to me a filler, but also an important episode at the same time. Let me explain what happens in this episode. The plot involves the Maximals trying to fortify the cavern that has the Ark in it to keep it away from the Predacons. And with their more limited resources, they try to fortify it by using Teletran 1, which is the Ark's computer, to gain access to its defenses. But with the massive gap in technology, they can't exactly get it working. So as a backup plan, they go underwater to find the other chunk of their base and hope that its old security system is still there. Which it is, which then turns the rest of the episode into a giant keep-away game with both the Maximals and the Predacons wanting it, with the Predacons actually getting it in the end. So, the reason I can't tell if this is filler or not is because of the Predacons having Sentinel. Yeah, believe it or not, out of all of Season 3, we only ever see them use it once. And that one time, it doesn't even work properly, which makes me question if this episode's even worth watching if you're going for the only canon episodes. But that's just how I feel on the subject. The next episode, Cutting Edge, starts off with a group of early humans getting attacked by a robotic raptor with laser eyes, causing the children who are with them to get separated, until they are thankfully saved by the Maximals. Okay, so here's the thing about the 3D models for the early humans, which I never thought to brought up back in the last season. I don't think they look that bad. I only say this because in Season 1, with all the animals and realistic textures they tried to do with the animation back then, it looked off, but you could still tell what it was, so I don't know, it was kind of a weird double-edged sword. But with the early humans, I think they look pretty good. Only because, even with all of our modern technology, we can only speculate what early humans looked like given how we only have their skeletons to work with, so having the humans look a little off, I think works great for this show's benefit. Back at their new base, it doesn't take long for them to realize that Megatron made the Raptor and that there's probably more of them, where they then send Cheetor and Black Arachnia to escort the children home to their tribe, and on the way there, they get attacked by more Raptors as well as some Predacons. But reinforcements come to their aid, with Megatron taking advantage of the situation by attacking the cave now that it's less guarded, where we then get a funny line from Megatron explaining how to find booby traps.
When expecting booby traps, always send a boob in first.
And we also get another funny moment when Rat Trap calls Optimus for help, but he's infected with a virus and starts acting weird.
There he is, my little guy. Isn't he cute?
That's not what I wanted to hear.
But then they get help from the human that Dinobot saved, and he even figures out how to take out the Raptors, with the others also getting help from Depth Charge, who's probably only there because Rampage is involved. With the episode ending with the children getting taken home and seeing that Cheetor is starting to form a crush on Black Arachnia, as well as learning that the Raptors were part of an experiment by Megatron who calls the experiment Transmetal 2. Now this, I think, was an entertaining episode. Unlike the last one, which I feel like went nowhere. But this one did have a lot of setup for later storylines. Like, with Megatron, we saw him plotting for something which we will get a payoff for soon. And I didn't mention this in the episode review or recap, but we even see Black Arachnia start to salvage parts from the Raptors for her own experiments, which we will see a payoff for later as well. And I also like this one little thing where we see the human that Dinobot saved still using the hammer to protect his people now since it was used to protect him. I don't know, I thought that was a nice little thing to see. Feral Scream starts off with Megatron continuing his Transmetal 2 experiments by taking a stasis pod to the top of a mountain during a thunderstorm, with the Maximals of course trying to stop him, but Cheetor accidentally shoots down Optimus. And at the spot where Megatron plans to do the experiment, we see him with a device that I can assume he stole from the Vok. Then we cut back to the Maximals getting help from Depth Charge, who claims that Rampage is nearby even though they haven't seen him yet. Back at the top of the mountain, we find out that the device that Megatron has is called a Transmetal Drive, and that the signal that Depth Charge was following was actually the other half of Rampage's spark that Megatron ripped out in order to control him, where he then puts it in the blank protoform that was in the pod to give it life.
Welcome, Transmetal 2, Dinobot.
Okay, so this definitely explains why in the last episode we saw them working with robotic raptors. And I have two reasons as to why they're, well, two guesses as to why they brought Dinobot back. One, he was a popular character, so they wanted him back. And for the show reason, I feel like Megatron wanted Dinobot back because, well, in the last season, he fought all the Predacons on his own before dying. So, yeah, I guess having someone like him on his side would be useful to him. As well, the Dinobot clone doesn't have a will of its own. It just does what Megatron tells him to do, even though it has a spark. But it's clear Megatron only did this because the last Dinobot betrayed him more than once. With Depth Charge coming in and seeing what his scanner was detecting, and we see the new Dinobot make quick work of him while still in beast mode. Then Cheetor comes in to help, where he takes the transmittal drive and gives it the depth charge, but he ends up getting caught in the machine, causing a massive explosion, which makes Depth Charge believe that Cheetor died. After conveying this news to Optimus, he tries scanning the transmittal drive to find out more about it, but the computer can't make heads or tails of it. So he chucks it in the lava, with Black Arachnia taking it for herself. But then we see that Cheetor did survive, but is badly damaged, and that whatever he got caught in is doing something to him. Back at the Predacon base, we see Rampage getting mad at how half his spark was put into a clone, which also has the ability to torture him if necessary. With Megatron telling the new Dinobot to retrieve the transmittal drive from Depth Charge. Speaking of, we see him getting another reading on Rampage, where he gets captured by the Predacons who ask him for the transmittal drive back. But then suddenly, they're being stalked by what looks to be a saber-toothed tiger who picks them off one by one until it's just him and Depth Charge, who then gets scared away when Optimus comes in, with the episode ending with the Maximals wondering what that was until Cheetor comes back looking terrible. Part 2 picks up with Cheetor in his room still banged up, with Optimus claiming that he refuses to go into the CR chamber for repairs, where he then has a nightmare about what's been happening to him, and when he wakes up, his body starts to change again, which causes a loud noise, which Rat Trap goes to investigate. However, when he goes to his room, we see the saber-toothed tiger from the last episode busting out and leaving the base. Then we cut to the Predacon base, where we see Megatron is able to deduce that Cheetor is now the new tiger, and that he's now a Transmetal too, like Dinobot. And for unknown reasons, Megatron wants Cheetor taken in. Then we cut to Cheetor in the woods trying to control his new beast mode, when all of a sudden his spark starts flowing a strange energy around his body, which ends up repairing him, with him also starting to remember what he was doing in his Transmetal 2 form. Back at the cavern, Optimus starts to piece together what's happening to Cheetor, and even demands answers from Depth Charge to confirm his theories on what's going on. But later, when they go to look for him, Cheetor comes back as if nothing had happened and claims to have taken care of the tiger, with Optimus asking to see the remains. And when they go to look for it, Optimus tries to get Cheetor to confess as to what's happening to him, but right as he's about to tell him, they get ambushed with Optimus getting taken out and Cheetor permanently transforming into his new Transmetal 2 body, which he seems to have good control in, at least in robot mode, but when he goes into beast mode, he becomes feral again, and after fending off Dinobot, Optimus is able to stabilize his spark with a power I think he got from combining with Optimus Prime for a bit, making Cheetor have full control of his new body, with the episode ending with Black Arachnia taking an interest in his new form, mostly because she plans on having a new body as well. So that was Feral Scream, and I gotta admit, for the season's first multi-part episode, they definitely went all out. Like, seeing Dinobot again was really cool, even if he was just relegated to being a clone that works for the Predacons. And the whole story with Cheetor I thought was very fascinating because it's technically a werewolf type story, but you don't see it with shows that have robots, so it was definitely something you would not expect this show to do. However, I am aware that they introduced what's practically a resurrected character with a new design, and a still alive character with a new design, which, yeah, it was clear, aside from the cool story, this episode was mostly meant to sell toys, which I will elaborate more on when I get to the end of the season. The next episode has the Maximals X-raying Black Arachnia, mostly to find out what exactly they did to make her a Predacon. They do find something, however, trying to tamper with it might kill her, which she isn't having. So she goes for a stroll where she comes across the new Dinobot, and messes with him to blow off some steam. Then for the next good chunk of the episode, it's just her and Dinobot fighting, with Silverbolt even coming in. And by the end of all the fighting, they have a bit of an argument on how she doesn't feel like she fits in with the Maximals and doesn't want to be reprogrammed into something she isn't. With Optimus coming in to tell her that it's her choice and that they won't force anything onto her. With the episode ending with all of them going home. Okay, so this episode was definitely a character study on Black Arachnia and how she fits in with the Maximals, especially given how she still identifies as a Predacon. Now, that right there was what makes this fascinating to me, because there have been a handful of other times in Transformers where characters switched alliances and even changed their allegiance from Autobot to Decepticon. But you never see it where a Decepticon joins the Autobots and says, "I'm still a Decepticon," despite the fact he's working for the opposite side, which, I'll admit, that's what keeps this episode interesting and why I feel like it's worth watching. Because it's not something you see in Transformers, which kind of sums up Beast Wars when you think about it, since this show is just kind of an out there idea, which a lot of it you haven't seen since, or is rarely touched upon in modern Transformer media. Okay, so Go With The Flow is just a filler episode that contributes nothing to the story. Yeah, so the plot is that Megatron's building a new weapon, and for reasons, Cybertronians can't get close to it, so he kidnaps a human child to finish it for him, which leads to the Maximals to save her and stop the weapon. The end. Okay, so apparently from what I gathered, this episode was supposed to be something completely different. Because remember back in Season 2 where Dinobot hooked himself up to the Maximal computer and that kind of led nowhere? Well, that was supposed to lead into an episode in this season where Rattrap would have found it in the salvaged parts of their old ship, which would have led to him to try and kidnap the new Dinobot and download the old memories into him, mostly as a way to get back his old friend who he regrets treating harshly. With the episode supposedly ending on a sad note showing that it didn't work. And apparently the higher-ups who worked on this show scrapped the episode and told them to make this one instead because they thought it was too dark and sad. I bring this up now because in this episode, Rattrap is one of the main characters, and so is Depth Charge. Yeah, I feel like Depth Charge would have been important in that episode because the new Dinobot does have half of Rampage's spark, and earlier we learned that Depth Charge is constantly tracking Rampage, but his sensors keep accidentally sending him to the Dinobot clone. So it would make sense for Rattrap to ask him for help in finding him. I don't know, I just find this fascinating, as well as the fact that despite the episode not getting made, a lot of the stuff that was supposed to happen in it does technically come back in a later episode. I will elaborate more on that when we get there. Trust me. Yeah, I'm going to say that a lot this season, aren't I? The next episode continues with Black Arachnia about to finish her own experiments with the Transmetal Drive, mostly in an attempt to upgrade her body. But then Silverbolt stops the experiment, which ends up causing problems with her. Back at base, they discover that her failed attempt at making herself a Transmetal had actually caused the device that made her a Predacon to start deteriorating, which will eventually cause her to go brain dead if they don't remove it soon. But given how something like this has never happened before, the risk is very high. Later on, during a nice moment between her and Silverbolt, she gets worse and they have to start operating on her immediately. But before they get started, she gives the access codes for the Ark to Optimus. Hey, wait a minute. In an earlier episode, we saw the Maximals trying to get the Ark's defenses operational, but couldn't because of compatibility issues. Which makes me wonder, Black Arachnia still has the access codes from the Golden Disc, so why did they just ask her to turn Teletran 1 on instead of wasting an episode trying to get Sentinel back? Yeah, when you really think about it, that's kind of a massive plot hole in that episode, which does help my argument by saying that it was a filler episode. However, when they go through with the procedure, Tarantulas finds out about this and conveys this to Megatron, Who guesses they wouldn't have attempted this unless they had already transferred the Ark's access codes to someone else? Who they can guess to be Optimus, which goes well with plans that he has for later. Then they start attacking the Maximal base, probably to make the procedure go poorly and kill Black Arachnia for betraying them. And with one well-timed shot from Tarantulas, the procedure goes poorly and she ends up dying, leading to Silverbolt to take revenge on Tarantulas. During his revenge quest, the transmetal drive starts moving and starts to do something to Black Arachnia which reignites her spark. Back at Silverbolt's revenge, he gets attacked by Rampage, but is thankfully saved by Black Arachnia.
Black Arachnia, maximize!
And her new body is definitely stronger than her old one, which is what she wanted in the first place. Then the episode comes to an end with Black Arachnia being a full-on Maximal now. Now, this was another good episode, which continued to continue on from plot points set up in earlier episodes, as well as setting up more for later ones. Granted, the way Black Arachnia came back to life was a bit out of nowhere, but I thought her new body was pretty cool. Which does still lead to my big problem with this season, which I am still saving for the end. Master Blaster starts off with the Predacons trying again to bring it to the Maximal base, but this time they put Quick Strike into something and shoot a dart at Optimus, which ends up going into a spark, which makes him act weird. Later on, Black Arachnia makes it back to base and sees that the door is just wide open and the place looks deserted. But then she meets up with Optimus, who's with the Predacons who are having Quick Strike controlling him, as well as seeing that the other Maximals have been captured. Where Megatron, along with the mind-controlled Optimus, make their way to the Ark, and instead of trying to kill Optimus Prime again, this time, he is going to take the spark of the original Megatron to gain more power like Optimus did. And when he tries to take it, it does resist him a bit before it fully goes inside of him. But then, after some convincing, Tarantulas makes Quick Strike betray Megatron, and he ends up getting thrown into the lava, with Tarantulas also gaining access to Teletran 1 and sets the Ark to self-destruct. But thankfully, Black Arachnia did break free and is preparing to save the other Maximals. But then we cut back to Tarantulas, who see the dragon head coming out of the lava, which happens to be Megatron with a new body. And with his new beast mode, he sets Tarantulas on fire. And then we see Black Arachnia free Optimus from his mind control, where the both of them go to the Ark, where Optimus and Megatron have a really cool one-on-one fight, with Black Arachnia trying to stop the Ark from exploding. And like most shows, she stops the explosion at the 1 second mark, because of course it does, with Optimus not doing too well against Megatron, but thankfully the rest of the Maximals come in to save him, with the episode ending with all of them agreeing that they need to win this war more now than ever. Okay, this was a really good episode because the stakes were definitely raised when Megatron took the original spark to gain more power. And by the end of the episode, he still has the spark in him, meaning that the Maximals can't kill him at the risk of altering history by accidentally extinguishing the original Megatron spark. So, yeah, despite Megatron getting betrayed by Tarantulas and Quick Strike, he gained a lot this episode. And I didn't bring this up, but there was a scene where Black Arachnia had psychic powers, which she never uses again. Yeah, that was weird. Another weird thing is that Megatron's new body is referred to as a Transmetal 2, but Optimus Primal's new body isn't. Yeah, for some reason, even though he got his upgraded body the same way, his new form is just called Optimal Optimus, which, I don't know, that never made sense to me, so let's just move on. The next episode, Other Visitors, starts off by bluntly showing us the Vok after not seeing them, well, ever. Heck, we haven't even seen them this whole season. Where they then discuss all the interferences with time going on Earth, where we finally see after so long Tigatron and Airazor, where they then fuse their bodies together into one being, which they take to Earth, with Tigatron and Airazor sparks following not too far behind. Then we cut to the Predacons putting Quickstrike on trial for his actions in the last episode, where they end up deeming him guilty and get ready to execute him. Until they notice something coming towards Earth, with both Tarantulas and the Maximals also taking notice, where we finally see the Predacons using Sentinel after wasting an episode of them trying to steal it, which ends up proving to be useless as it shuts down when the Vought get close, leading to Megatron to make the hard decision to tell the Predacons to abandon ship, right as the Vought crash into it, practically destroying their base. With Rat Trap celebrating by thinking the Beast Wars are over, until the rest of them bring up how the readings on the computer show that the Vought are back. Then we get a good look at their new body and even get their new name.
I am Tiger Hawk, emissary of the Vought.
Where he ends up making quick work of the Predacons, leaving only him and Megatron, with Rat Trap still wondering why they aren't celebrating. Where they then bring up the whole Megatron still having the original spark, and that once the Vought are done with the Predacons, they'll probably go after them next. Back at what was the Predacons' base, we get a really entertaining fight between Megatron and Tigerhawk, with Tigerhawk being the victor, where Optimus comes in to stop him from killing Megatron and potentially destroying time and space. But he doesn't list it and throws Optimus underground, where he's then ambushed by spider drones from Tarantulas. Later on, we see the sparks of Tigatron and Airazor give an unconscious Cheetor a vision of what actually happened to them, where they then guide him to where their body is. Then we cut to Tarantulas' secret lab, where we learn that he plans to wipe out the Vought inside of Tigerhawk and take control of his body to destroy the Ark. Where Tigerhawk then tells him the obvious part that if he destroys the Ark, he might not exist anymore, leading to Tarantulas to claim that him and the Tripredacus Council are not descendants of Autobots or Decepticons, which definitely explains why in the last episode he didn't hesitate to try and blow up the Ark. Then when he tries to destroy the Vought, they end up leaving Tigerhawk's body and try to take over Tarantulas, leading to him to try and shoot at them, which ends up causing his machine to target him, which ends up killing both him and the Vought, with Cheetor coming in to save Tigerhawk and just barely making it out. Later on, the combined sparks of Tigatron and Airazor go into Tigerhawk's body, with the episode ending with them now as one rejoining the Maximals. This was another great episode with an interesting story, and I'm so glad that after all this time, we finally got to see what the Vought look like. And we got to see Tigatron and Airazor again with a new body. Now, fun fact about this, back when this episode came out, Hasbro didn't want Tigerhawk in the show because they weren't 100% on whether or not the toy would be ready by the time he was supposed to show up in the show. Also, by the way, a lot of these toys, they're not the originals, they're updated versions made for modern toy lines. Except for this depth charge that we found at a Value Village. But enough about that, let's get into the show's finale. Nemesis Part 1 starts off with Tigerhawk practicing his new body and powers, while Optimus recites the Covenant of the Primes. Then Rhinox says that they need to find Megatron and end the Beast Wars now before he does even more damage than he already has. But with the Predacon ship destroyed, they're practically on the run now and the Maximals don't know where they are. Speaking of, we see them trying to figure out what to do next, with half of them going to look for a new base, while the other half goes through the wreckage of Tarantulas' lab from the last episode, where they find a hatch leading somewhere, but are then spotted by the Maximals, where they then head out to end this once and for all, where we then cut to the half of the Predacons who went down the hatch, and they find a submarine that leads to something that Megatron seems to really want, with Depth Charge outside trying to get to them, but they rig the bomb to the entrance, which explodes, and Silverbolt ends up taking the brunt of the explosion. Where we then cut to a human village, and we see the other half of the Predacons who want to take it as their new base. Except for Waspinator. Yeah, apparently he doesn't want to be a Predacon anymore after all the times he's been blown to pieces over and over again. So they shoot at him and then try to take the village for themselves, but unlike last time, the humans are actually fighting back. Back in the underwater cavern, Optimus finds out what Megatron is heading towards is called the Nemesis. Where we then cut to Megatron, who explains that the Nemesis was the warship that shot down the Ark and is said to be the most powerful warship in Transformer history. As Megatron begins to set up shop, Depth Charge arrives but encounters Rampage, where they start fighting around an Energon reserve as the ship begins to power up. Eventually, he cuts him open and stabs a piece of raw Energon into his spark, causing a massive explosion that even affects Dinobot now that half his spark is extinguished. With Optimus seeing the explosion and assuming that he destroyed the Nemesis at the cost of Depth Charge's life, with the episode ending off by showing that even after such a large explosion, the Nemesis still takes off. Part 2 starts off with Megatron wasting no time and blasting everything in his path, with Optimus and Tigertron trying to stop the Nemesis. And it's around this time that Dinobot is starting to feel off, with Megatron just brushing it off by saying it probably has to do with Rampage being dead, given how half his spark was used to make the Dinobot clone. After Optimus and Tigerhawk fail to stop the Nemesis, Tigerhawk tells Optimus to go back and help the others, while he stays behind to fend off the Nemesis as long as he can. Back at the Maximal base, we see them prepping for Operation Eternity, which is to basically move the Ark in hopes of getting it away from Megatron. Back outside, we see Tigerhawk using his new powers from the Vogue to try and stop the Nemesis, and he almost succeeds until Megatron fires at him with full power, which basically destroys him, and Dinobot has not been liking how things have been going since Rampage died. Then we see Optimus get the news about Tigerhawk's death, which makes him want to face Megatron once and for all. Then we cut to Inferno and Quickstrike still terrorizing the humans, until they notice the Nemesis about to fire on them. And inside the ship, we see Dinobot looking at the human he saved in the episode he died in, and he even starts to act like his old self by asking Megatron, where's the honor in all this mindless destruction? With Megatron ignoring his concerns and fires on the human colony, killing Inferno and Quickstrike in the process. Back on the Ark, the Maximals get ready to take off as Megatron gets closer. However, the Ark doesn't have the power to take off, let alone fight. Then they notice the Nemesis' tractor beam on them, with Optimus flying towards it to stop Megatron. With the Maximals trying everything they can to get the Ark moving. And when Optimus comes face to face with Megatron, we get this really cool moment from him.
Oh, well, come on, let's have it. The usual destiny and honor speech.
Speech this.
However, things aren't looking good for the Maximals, given how the Ark still won't move despite their best efforts. And back on the Nemesis, we see that Optimus isn't doing too well against Megatron either, with Dinobot secretly downloading schematics about the Ark and sending it to the Maximals, which reveal an escape pod that wasn't mentioned in their history, meaning that they can take it and not have to worry about changing history. Then as Megatron tells Dinobot to fire on them, he remembers who he is and tells him no, with Megatron throwing him aside, where the Nemesis gets hit by the pod they found in the Ark, making it crash, with Dinobot staying behind as Optimus leaves with the ship crashing. Where we then cut to later, and after 3 seasons and after they fixed up the pod, they finally get off the planet, with Optimus giving a nice speech about their time on Earth as they head back to Cybertron, with Megatron latched onto the ship as they go back. Then when the show ends, we see that they accidentally left Waspinator behind and he's now seen as a god to the humans. So that was the last episode of Beast Wars, and I gotta say, this was a great episode to end the show on. Granted, I don't feel like it was as good as Season 2's ending, but the plot involving Megatron finding an old Decepticon warship that still worked, unlike the Ark, was cool to see, especially the way they took it down. But there are a couple problems I have with this last episode. One of which being Dinobot. Don't get me wrong, he was cool as he always is, but the fact that out of nowhere he just got his memories back and helped the Maximals doesn't make any sense, especially given how he is a clone. He shouldn't remember this. But remember how I mentioned that back in Season 2, Dinobot made a backup of himself? And I did also mention there was supposed to be an episode in this season where Rattrap was supposed to find the backup, kidnap the clone, and try to reinstall them in hopes of getting his friend back, which was supposed to not work. And this episode was supposed to be the payoff by showing that all of Rattrap's efforts did come back in a good way. But like I said, the episode was never made, but because of this big plot hole, a lot of fans consider the episode canon despite the fact that it was never made. Now, the second problem I have with this episode, which is actually an even bigger plot hole, they still left Megatron's original spark in the other Megatron when they went back to Cybertron. And the only way I can sort of forgive this is the fact that on one of the older DVDs for Season 3, it did come with a work print version of the episode, or at least Part 2, which had some deleted scenes left in, one of which being that they did animate the Maximals putting the original Megatron spark back in its body before leaving. So, yeah, they did bring this up, but for one reason or another, the scene was deleted, so they just leave the planet with the original Megatron still having the spark in him. And unfortunately, the DVD set I have for the show doesn't have the work print as a bonus feature. However, it is on YouTube if you know where to look and are just curious to see it. And so that was Season 3 of Beast Wars / the final season of the show, and unlike Season 2, I didn't think Season 3 was as good, but it was still a good season, even if there was a bit more filler. Which, I have been holding off on saying this. My biggest problem with this season was the new character introductions and the upgraded bodies. Don't get me wrong, they are cool, but the way they introduced them, I feel like was a downgrade from the last season, because in Season 2, they try to just get through it all as soon as possible, just so they can get to the story as quick as they can, which I appreciated. The story in Season 2 was awesome. But here, I don't know, it just felt like we get one episode with a new character, next episode, new upgraded body, next episode, new character, so on and so on, which made it hard for me to grow attached to these characters in new forms. And, like I said before, they were just clearly trying to sell you new toys. And it definitely feels like this the most with Tigerhawk, because he's introduced in the third last episode. And then the next episode is practically the two-part finale where we see him, and then by the final episode, he dies instantly, which makes me wonder why they even bothered to bring him back. And my other big problem with this season is actually Optimus Primal's new body. Like, yeah, I know the colors are a bit all over the place, but I thought it was cool, but the problem being that in almost every fight he was in, he always either got shot and damaged or messed up in one form or another, which in a way made him feel so weak and kind of useless. And here's the thing, there's another show I really like called Justice League, where they did the same thing with Superman by thinking he was too powerful, so they kind of nerfed him to make him feel like he wasn't too OP. But in the process, they made him kind of the weakest character in the group, kind of like with Optimus here. I don't know, I just feel like that was a wasted opportunity, and if they're trying to sell toys, what kid will want to buy the guy who keeps getting shot down and beat up every time he goes into battle? Yeah, that was a big problem this season had. And despite all these problems, I still really liked Season 3 of Beast Wars. And yeah, I was able to give some legit complaints about why I didn't feel like it was as good as the last season, but it still had the characters I really liked. The new ones that were introduced when we had time to get to know them, I did like. And the new status quo of them trying to defend the Ark and save time was a cool idea. So, yeah, Season 3. It has its problems, but I still love it. Kind of like how, despite how I wasn't born when the show came out, I love this show. And after 30 years, I still think it holds up great. And if you're a Transformers fan who hasn't seen this show, I still recommend it despite the dated animation. It's a great show. And I know the DVD sets are kind of unfortunately out of print, but right now, at the time of making this video, it is for free to watch on Tubi, so if you want to check it out, check it out. If you're already a fan, I recommend watching it again just for fun to celebrate 30 years. And with all that, I thank all of you for watching my little retrospective on Beast Wars, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. See ya!